Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Clara Monroe walked across the living room of her Manhattan apartment with that natural confidence that made her seem to own the world. Her heels clicked on the gleaming parquet floor, and her icy gaze swept over Ethan Parker, her boyfriend. Since they met, she had made a habit of putting him down with subtle but cutting remarks, treating him like a naive young man, incapable of understanding the codes of success and luxury. Ethan, sitting on the sofa, wore a simple suit, a far cry from the designer labels and prestige Clara was used to. His shy smile and gentle eyes evoked a mixture of annoyance and condescension in Clara. What she didn't know was that behind this unassuming exterior, Ethan was no longer the young man she thought she knew. Discreetly, over the years, he had invested in a fledgling tech startup. Successes had accumulated, silently. Today, he was a multimillionaire, but no one in his circle, least of all Clara, had the slightest idea. His apparent calm and patience were not weakness, they were the silent weapon of a man who had learned to wait for the perfect moment. That evening, like so many others, Clara laughed at his little taunts, thinking Ethan was defenseless. But behind his smile, Ethan was thinking. He hadn't just gained wealth, he had gained confidence and strength. Every humiliation he endured now paved the way for a future where the roles would be reversed. As Clara raised her glass in an arrogant toast, Ethan gave her a calm, deep look, a look that held a silent promise. Soon, she would discover that the man she had thought weak had become her equal, perhaps even more. And when that moment arrived, Clara Monroe would realize that the world did not entirely belong to her, and that she had underestimated the one she thought she controlled. Clara Monroe was in a regal mood that evening. In her chic Manhattan apartment, she had organized a small dinner with a few hand-picked friends, but mainly to have the opportunity to show off and, to put down Ethan Parker, her boyfriend of 2 years. "Ethan, are you sure you don't want to wear something a little more presentable?" she said with a half-sarcastic, half-boastful smile, looking at the simple suit he was wearing. Ethan looked up, maintaining his legendary calm. "I'm fine like this, Clara. I feel comfortable." But Clara didn't just want to tease him, she wanted to humiliate him. "Comfortable?" she exclaimed. "In this living room, with all these important people around us? You should at least try to look, well, respectable." The guests laughed politely, but Ethan felt the sting of humiliation. Yet he showed nothing. Deep inside, a discreet smile appeared, almost invisible. This smile held a secret. He was no longer the naive young man she thought she knew. After dinner, Clara continued to subtly criticize him, his way of speaking, his posture, his choice of wine. Every word was an attack, every laugh a small victory in her eyes. Ethan listened patiently, weighing his words, his attitude, calculating the moment when he would finally get his revenge. When they were left alone, Clara collapsed onto the sofa, triumphant. "Ethan, sometimes I wonder how you manage to survive in this world. You're so ordinary." Ethan looked at her calmly, his smile widening slightly. "Perhaps you should learn not to underestimate people, Clara. Sometimes, what seems small or ordinary can hide something bigger than we imagine." Clara raised an eyebrow, amused and slightly annoyed. She didn't yet know that, in the months to come, this remark would be the first in a series of trials that would completely reverse their roles. For Ethan Parker was no longer just a naive young man. He was rich, powerful, and ready to show Clara what that really meant. Ethan returned home after a day's work, but this work was nothing like what Clara had imagined. For the past few years, he had quietly invested in a tech startup. A small company, invisible to the general public, but brimming with potential. And today, this startup had just experienced explosive financial growth. Ethan Parker was now a multimillionaire. He sat at his desk, watching the numbers scroll across his screen. Every investment, every decision had been carefully calculated. He remembered Clara's taunts, his friends' laughter at his expense. Every humiliation he had endured had only strengthened his resolve. One day, he murmured to himself, one day, she will understand. He didn't want revenge out of anger. No. Ethan wanted to subtly show him what he had become, and above all, make him understand that wealth and power weren't just appearances. They were the fruit of patience, intelligence, and courage. That evening, when he met up with Clara, she suspected nothing. She continued talking about glamorous parties, designer clothes, and social success. Ethan listened, his apparent calm masking his new status. But this time, something had changed in her eyes. He was no longer the shy young man, subject to her mockery. He was confident, calculating, ready to reverse the dynamic that had always worked against him. When she timidly asked him to choose a restaurant for their weekend outing, he replied with a simple smile. "I might have some interesting options this time, Clara." She raised her eyebrows, intrigued, without fully grasping the implications of that sentence. For Ethan, every detail, every moment, was now a playground where he would gradually regain control. And Clara Monroe would soon discover that the man she had thought humble and ordinary had become someone she could never ignore again. The following week, Clara invited Ethan to an exclusive social event hosted by one of her most influential friends. As always, she had carefully chosen her dress, her heels, and her confident demeanor. Ethan, on the other hand, opted for a simple suit and a calm smile, perfectly at ease in this world where he had never sought to impress, until now. "Ethan, try to smile a little more," Clara said with that mixture of sarcasm and authority that always had a way of irritating and testing him. "You look so ordinary." "I'm already smiling, Clara," he replied simply, remaining composed. His gaze, however, was sharp and attentive. He observed every detail, the guests, the decorations, the protocol. He knew he was no longer the same man she used to belittle. As the evening progressed, Clara couldn't help but ridicule him in front of their friends. She commented on his way of speaking, his apparent shyness, and even his choice of wine. Each remark was punctuated by stifled laughter, and Ethan patiently endured it, always with that enigmatic smile. But this time, something changed. As a group of guests discussed the latest technological innovations, Ethan chimed in with a precision and knowledge that left everyone speechless. He cited figures, market trends, and startup names with an assurance that contrasted sharply with his unassuming appearance. Clara, surprised, frowned. "Wait, do you know what you're talking about?" Ethan simply smiled, calm and measured. "Yes, Clara. I know exactly what I'm talking about." The guests turned to look at him, impressed. For the first time, Clara felt a shiver of unease. She realized there was more to Ethan than she had ever wanted to see. And although she tried to hide her astonishment, a small voice inside her whispered that the world had just changed, and that she was no longer in control. That evening marked a turning point. The usual mockery and humiliation no longer had the same effect. Ethan was no longer the naive and weak person she had thought him to be. He was patient, strategic, and ready to gradually reveal to Clara the secret she could never have imagined: he had become a millionaire. A few days after the social event, Ethan sent Clara a carefully worded invitation. A simple white card with an elegant message. "Clara, I'd like to invite you to a special dinner this Saturday. Elegant attire requested. E." Clara frowned, intrigued and flattered. She couldn't imagine that this seemingly modest man could organize a dinner worthy of the most exclusive circles in Manhattan. Her already ambitious mind began to dream, could this be her chance to shine and show her friends how much influence she could have over her poor boyfriend? Saturday evening arrived. Clara appeared, dressed in a vibrant red gown, her hair perfectly styled, and adorned with sparkling jewelry. She stood tall, a confident smile on her lips. Ethan, true to form, wore a simple, understated suit, but with an air of absolute calm that contrasted sharply with Clara's restlessness. "So, what have you planned for this mysterious dinner?" she asked with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. "You'll see," replied Ethan, simply, without betraying the slightest emotion. When they arrived at the dinner venue, Clara was speechless. The place was a luxurious private restaurant reserved for the city's most prominent figures. The dim lighting, elegantly set tables, and impeccable staff brought out all the extravagance that Clara loved so much, but this time, she realized that this luxury didn't come from her, but from him. Ethan led Clara to their table and sat down, a mysterious smile on his lips. "Impressed?" he asked calmly. It's... Clara stammered, unable to find the words. For the first time, she felt a shiver of unease. Everything was perfectly orchestrated, and she had no control. This dinner wasn't just a romantic outing. It was the beginning of a series of revelations where Ethan would slowly but surely reverse the roles. Clara Monroe, used to dominating and humiliating, would discover that the young man she thought naive now possessed a power and influence she hadn't suspected. And from tonight onwards, nothing would ever be the same again. The private restaurant shone with a discreet yet impressive luxury: linen tablecloths, fine china, sparkling chandeliers. Clara, accustomed to this kind of atmosphere, expected to be the star of the evening. But that night, the roles would be reversed. As the waiter presented the tasting menu, Ethan smiled calmly and, with an elegant gesture, began to explain some of the options with astonishing precision and knowledge of the finest wines and rare ingredients. Clara, used to leading the conversation, felt her control gradually slipping away. Then came dessert. Ethan leaned slightly towards her and said, "Clara, I think it's time you knew something." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued but eager to shine. "Oh? And what is it?" "I'm not simply the man you think I am," he said calmly. Then, with a simple gesture, he took out his phone and discreetly showed Clara the recent figures for his investments and the valuation chart of his startup. Clara felt her breath catch. The numbers scrolled before her eyes, millions, silently accumulated over the years. Her face went from disbelief to embarrassment, then to slight panic. What?" she stammered. You're a millionaire?" Ethan nodded, still calm. "Yes, Clara. And I never told you because it wasn't the right time. But today, I think you understand." The guests around them, fascinated by Ethan's aura of calm and power, couldn't tear their eyes away. Clara, however, was petrified. For the first time, she realized that the man she had humiliated, belittled, and underestimated now possessed the power and influence she had believed to be his alone. "Ethan. She began, but no word seemed appropriate. "Clara," he said softly but firmly, "this isn't about revenge. It's simply the moment you see reality. You always thought you controlled this relationship, but today you understand there's more to it than meets the eye." Clara lowered her eyes, her cheeks flushed. She had just realized that her vanity and mockery had blinded her for years. This dinner was not just a meal, it was a turning point, a moment when the balance of power shifted silently but definitively. After dinner, Ethan decided against humiliating Clara in a spectacular way. He knew that patience and subtlety would be his best weapons. He began to show her, through small actions, what wealth, influence, and respect truly meant. A few days later, he invited Clara to a fundraiser for a charity she had once openly criticized at a social event. Surprised, Clara accepted, thinking she could still shine. Little did she know that Ethan had organized the entire event, chosen the guests, and planned every detail. When they arrived, Clara immediately sensed that something had changed. The guests greeted her politely, but it was Ethan who drew everyone's attention. Influential entrepreneurs, renowned investors, and celebrated philanthropists were there, and all seemed to know Ethan. Clara realized she had never truly understood the position of the man beside her. "You see, Clara," Ethan said calmly, gesturing to the room, "what you took for trivialities can sometimes change the world." Clara frowned, slightly annoyed but fascinated. "You're not going to make me believe that all this is for me." "No," he replied with a smile, "it's for you, and so that you understand that arrogance and contempt lead nowhere." With each interaction that evening, Clara felt the dynamic shift. Her usual sarcasm fell flat in the face of Ethan's patience, calm, and natural authority. For the first time, she understood that style and good looks weren't enough to guarantee power. True influence came from intelligence, vision, and self-control. As they left the event, Clara walked silently beside Ethan. She didn't yet know how to accept this new reality, but one thing was clear: she had learned her first lesson. And if she wanted to continue living her life, she would have to change her perspective on the world. A few weeks after the dinner and fundraiser, Clara began to feel a frustration she had never known before. Her usual sarcasm and attempts to dominate Ethan no longer had any effect. For the first time, she was facing someone who wouldn't be intimidated, someone who knew her worth and knew how to assert it calmly and elegantly. One evening, while they were having dinner at home, Clara tried to regain control. "Ethan, you know I can't stand it when you talk in front of my friends like you're the boss," she said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "This isn't your world, you should stay in your lane." Ethan put down his fork and looked at her, calmly but with a new firmness in his gaze. "Clara, you always thought I was just a naive young man. You judged me, belittled me, and humiliated me." He paused, letting his words sink into the heavy air of the living room. "But look at me now. I'm no longer someone you could control. And I'm not here to play your games." Clara felt a mixture of anger and surprise. You dare speak to me in that tone?" she stammered, unable to hide her distress. "I'm not talking to you in a tone of derision," Ethan replied, "I'm talking to you with the truth. You thought power and wealth were natural to you. But true power isn't measured by what you possess, it's measured by who you are. And I, Clara, have become someone you can no longer underestimate." For the first time, Clara felt small and vulnerable. All the taunts she had used for years came flooding back to her mind, and she realized the extent of her mistakes. She had underestimated this man from the start, and now she was paying the emotional price. Ethan, for his part, felt neither excessive satisfaction nor a thirst for revenge. His goal was not to destroy Clara, but to show her the truth. He wanted her to understand, to change, and to learn to respect not only him, but also the value of others. That evening, the confrontation wasn't just verbal. It was a turning point. Clara Monroe, arrogant and domineering, had just met someone for the first time who didn't obey her, who wouldn't let herself be humiliated. And this realization would change the rest of her life. In the following weeks, Ethan continued to subtly introduce Clara to his world. He no longer sought to provoke or ridicule her, he wanted her to understand, at her own pace, the value of respect and humility. He took her to visit charitable projects he supported, to meet entrepreneurs she had once looked down on, and to attend meetings where her decisions had a real impact. Each experience was carefully orchestrated to show her that true success was not measured by appearances or arrogance, but by vision, patience, and action. At first, Clara was skeptical. She often whispered, "I don't understand, why are you doing all this for me?" Ethan looked at her gently. "This isn't for you, Clara. It's so you understand that the world doesn't revolve around appearances. You've always believed that humiliation was a tool for control. I want you to see that there's another way to live and influence others." Gradually, Clara felt a change within herself. Her usual sarcasm became less frequent. Her mocking remarks fell flat in the face of Ethan's quiet confidence. She began to observe, to listen, and even to admire. For the first time, she saw the man she had believed to be weak as a partner, equal and powerful in his own way. One evening, as they were leaving a charity exhibition, Clara said softly, "I think I was stupid. I was arrogant and unfair." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "We all learn from our mistakes. The important thing is to recognize them and change." That night, Clara understood that she could no longer go back. Her transformation had begun. She was no longer the arrogant woman who laughed at Ethan's weaknesses. She was beginning to become someone capable of respect, humility, and even genuine admiration for the man she had once despised. And in the silence of the night, she realized that this transformation, though unexpected, could be liberating. She was no longer a captive of her vanity, and for the first time, she could envision a relationship based on equality and sincerity. Clara woke up that morning with a strange feeling. The past few months had changed her, but what she felt now went beyond simple admiration for Ethan. It was a mixture of shame, regret, and personal awakening. She remembered every taunt, every condescending laugh, every humiliation inflicted on the one she believed to be weak. Sitting in front of her mirror, she ran her hands over her face and whispered, "How could I have been so blind?" Every detail of her past with Ethan came flooding back. The dinners where she ridiculed him, the social gatherings where she humiliated him in front of her friends, the remarks she thought were innocent but which had left their mark on the man she loved. She realized, with a pang of regret, that she had wasted a lot of time judging by appearances and feeding off his arrogance. When Ethan arrived for their morning date, he found her sitting silently and thoughtfully. She looked up and, for the first time, spoke without arrogance or sarcasm. "Ethan. I think I finally understand. I've never been fair to you." Ethan sat down next to her calmly, his gaze full of understanding. "Clara. I didn't expect you to understand overnight. But recognizing your mistakes is the first step. You're starting to see the value of others and understand that respect is earned, not demanded." Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of realization. She had finally understood that true strength lay not in control or mockery, but in patience, empathy, and understanding. This realization changed everything. Clara Monroe, who had always believed that the world revolved around her charisma and apparent power, now saw the truth: Ethan Parker wasn't just rich or influential. He was patient, intelligent, and profoundly fair. And she knew that if she wanted to continue to exist in his life, she had to change radically. No longer out of necessity, but out of sincerity. She had to become someone capable of respect, equality, and humility. That day, Clara realized that the transformation wasn't just the one Ethan had orchestrated for her. It was her own as well. And this realization would pave the way for the new beginning they would soon share. A few months had passed since the pivotal dinner and Ethan's quiet but powerful lessons. Clara Monroe was no longer the same woman. Her sarcasm had vanished, replaced by sincere reflection and profound curiosity. Her past humiliations now seemed almost unreal, like a nightmare of arrogance from which she was finally waking. One evening, they were strolling hand in hand through Central Park. The sky was tinged with orange and pink by the sunset. Clara broke the silence. "Ethan. I want to thank you. For everything. For showing me, myself. I never understood how wrong I was." Ethan looked at her with a calm and kind smile. "Clara, I didn't want to punish you. I simply wanted you to understand that respect, humility, and patience matter more than anything else." For the first time, Clara felt a profound sense of relief. She no longer needed to defend her ego or shine through vanity. She could be herself, sincere and equal to the man at her side. "So," she said softly, "shall we begin a new chapter?" Ethan nodded, placing his hands on his shoulders. "Yes. A new beginning. Based on equality, respect, and genuine love." Clara smiled, and this time, that smile was not tinged with superiority, but with understanding and admiration. She finally saw the man Ethan truly was: powerful yet humble, rich yet generous, patient yet determined. And as they walked together, the sun disappearing behind the Manhattan skyscrapers, they both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The relationship had changed, and this time, it was built on solid, fair, and deep foundations. Clara had learned her lesson. Ethan had proven his worth. And together, they would move forward, united by respect, trust, and a story that had transformed their lives forever.